quite an interesting set of results in the past about week and a half. We had Heat 2, the realistic mini season, and Donington in the past week and a half, while I was away from YouTube, busy with tests and classes and race preparation for the team. But we're going to skip along to the final results of the Saturday race that happened at about 8:30, and no surprise, we have Static Energy for the race win once again, and I believe he qualified on pole position. If not, no, not really did end up taking that from him, but did see quite an improvement from Bullet. He did end up qualifying fourth this time around and ended up finishing in P3. We had no, not really qualify in third, which was a little strange, but I think that's exactly where he qualified last race, so it's not extremely surprising. We have Rip qualifying a marvelous P2, and then we have Scott Meek, Stocky, Sinister, Flying Spark, Evil Monkey, GT Vivo, Rhino, and Big not setting a... Actually, he qualified 7th. So I think it was Rhino who didn't set a qualifying time for the second spa race on the Saturday, but I believe No Not Really did end up having the pit strategy this time around. However, he overall didn't have the pace compared to Static Energy. There was a little bit of a battle between Static, No Not Really, and I believe Bullet and Rip. Rip was knocked off, I believe, in the first lap. Not exactly sure who it was, but he was thrown off in the first lap within the first chicane in the broadcast, and then ended up having to work his way back up, but never really getting much higher than 5th, as the tires did get completely knackered. But it was an excellent battle between Rip himself and Blind Jesus throughout the entire race, and if you would like to see how that unfolded, you can check that out. The link will be down in the description. But moving on to the realistic mini season, which did feature full damage and realistic weather conditions, although the weather did kind of change a bit fast for my liking. We have Travic winning the race with Rip on pole and No Not Really in third. There was only about 5 or 6 minutes of running, so only 6 people out of the 11 ended up qualifying, which made it a very interesting start, as we had quite a few people go off in the first lap in the raining conditions. I believe it was still light rain, medium rain at the time. And quite a few people ended up going off into the tricky corner 4 of sector 1, where you have to transition all the load in the rear of the car to try and get a decent square exit going on to the next 3 corners. And a lot of people went off there, and right at about turn 6 before they got to Rivage, some people went out on the exit of that corner as well. And it was an overall tricky race. The conditions didn't really make it any easier. I believe there was a bit of rubber in some parts of the track, which made it even more slick, and that's probably why we had so many complications with people just trying to keep the car in the road throughout the race. They also had to deal with the turbulent air of the other cars. Quite sure that people were running quite a bit of downforce for this race, as it is Spa, it is Belgium, and it always tends to rain. But I think the most interesting part of this is that we had Rip, who did qualify on pole, lead about 80% of the race, only to have it taken by No Not Really after the weather changeover. The track did end up drying out for a brief period of time, and in that changeover, No Not Really did end up picking the dry tire and gaining about 2 seconds a lap until he ultimately passed Rip, going around the outside, and then Rip went into the pits to change tires, but couldn't make up the time in between himself and No Not Really. Static Energy came behind him, and Stocky came in 5th place. But there's a little bit of a controversy on how No Not Really went from leading the race for the last 20-30% of the race to losing it in the final lap. Apparently, when they went from the dry conditions to monsoon weather, all within a span of a good 3 laps, and he got caught up with his teammate, who I believe was in position 4 or 5 at the time, and they ended up colliding on the entry to Sector 1. The number 11 car of Stocky just lost the rears, trying to nurse the car back to the pits when the downpour came, and No Not Really just getting collected by him on the straight. Could that have been avoided? I'm not completely sure. Maybe it could have pitted a lap earlier, but I mean, you really can't point fingers here for an incident such as that one. Everyone did end up getting caught out on the dry tire. Stocky wasn't the only one. And I believe No Not Really either just changed onto intermediate or was trying to stick it out as well. So in terms of the race stewards or any breach of penalties, there were none because it was a racing incident, but that did end up being a very lucky break for Travick, who ended up going right past No on the Kemmel Straight and going on to win the Belgian Grand Prix for the Realistic Mini Series to give himself a little bit of momentum for that season. I believe it's a 4-race season, so every point does end up counting. And we hope to see more from the 3 drivers of Travick, Rip, and No Not Really quite soon. So this is just part 1 out of the 2-part review over the past 1.5 weeks. The second video will be down the description in a link when it does come out. Meanwhile, this is NearFear, and I'll catch you guys all on the flip. Later.